Beneath the soft glow of a December sunset in New York City, Gabriel Lanes stood by the vast glass wall of his penthouse office. The skyline stretched out like an urban tapestry, the city pulsing with life below. From this vantage point, at the heart of his luxury fragrance empire, Lumina Essence, Gabriel could see the world he had meticulously crafted. The air was rich with the scents of amber, lavender, and citrus, signature notes from his best-selling line. But for all the grandeur of his achievements, Gabriel, now 36, felt an unsettling emptiness, as if success had built him a gilded cage rather than a life of fulfillment. He had reached heights most only dreamed of. Lumina Essence dominated the fragrance market, and his name was synonymous with innovation and opulence. Yet, the personal part of his life remained a blank canvas. Years of fleeting relationships had left him jaded. Each romance started like a fresh melody, but all was ended in dissonance, compatibility lost in a fog of conflicting priorities and hollow connections. By now, Gabriel was exhausted by the endless cycle of disappointment. That evening, as the city lights began to sparkle like scattered diamonds, his oldest friend and business partner, Marcus Steele, stepped into his office. Marcus had been with Gabriel since their college days at Columbia University. Unlike Gabriel, Marcus was pragmatic, someone who preferred logic over sentiment. They stood together on the balcony overlooking Manhattan, the wind carrying a crisp chill. "Marcus, I can't do this anymore," Gabriel confessed, his voice tinged with frustration. "I've wasted too much time on people who don't understand me or what I need. I want something real, something lasting." Marcus raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing at his lips. "The perfect woman, huh? Haven't we been down this road before? What makes you think you'll find her now?" "This time is different," Gabriel replied firmly. "I'm done stumbling around without direction. I've decided to approach this like I would any challenge in business, with a plan." Marcus chuckled, but noted the determination in his friend's eyes. "All right, I'll bite. What's the plan?" Gabriel took a breath, as if solidifying his resolve. "I'm going to create a checklist, a guide. 7 qualities a woman must have to be the one for me. Whoever meets them all will be the one I marry." Marcus stared at him, caught between disbelief and amusement. "A checklist? You're serious?" "Absolutely," Gabriel said, crossing his arms. "It's not about perfection. It's about finding someone who aligns with what I truly value, but I need help figuring out what these qualities should be." "And where do you plan to get this wisdom?" Marcus asked, his skepticism growing. Gabriel hesitated before answering, his voice quieter now. "I heard about a spiritual guide in Brooklyn Heights, a woman known as Madame Lumiere. They say she's insightful, almost clairvoyant. She might help me uncover what I need to look for." Marcus laughed outright. "You? Going to a mystic? That's rich. You, of all people, trusting something as intangible as intuition or fate." "It's not about blind faith," Gabriel shot back. "It's about opening my mind to possibilities beyond what I can see or calculate. Maybe I've been too rigid, too focused on control. I'm ready to explore something different." Seeing the conviction on Gabriel's face, Marcus relented with a shrug. "Fine. If you think this is what you need, go for it. Just don't forget, love isn't a formula. The signs you're looking for might show up in ways you can't predict." The next day, Gabriel found himself navigating the narrow streets of Brooklyn Heights. The brownstone-lined avenues and cobblestone sidewalks exuded an old-world charm, contrasting with the bustling pace of Manhattan. Eventually, he arrived at a modest storefront nestled between a bookstore and a coffee shop. A faded sign above the door read, "Madame Lumiere, guidance beyond sight." Hesitating for only a moment, Gabriel pushed open the door. Inside, the space was dimly lit, illuminated by flickering candles and the soft glow of amber sconces. The air was heavy with the scent of sandalwood and myrrh. Intricately woven tapestries adorned the walls, and the faint sound of wind chimes filled the room. Seated behind a round wooden table was Madame Lumiere herself. She was an older woman with striking silver hair cascading over her shoulders. Her sharp blue eyes seemed to pierce through Gabriel the moment he stepped in. "Gabriel Lanes," she said, her voice a harmonious blend of warmth and authority. "I've been expecting you." Gabriel's brows furrowed, but he quickly masked his surprise. "I've heard you can offer guidance on matters of the heart," he began, his tone polite but businesslike. "I need your help to identify the qualities, the signs, that will lead me to the right woman." Madame Lumiere motioned for him to sit. "The heart's desires are rarely straightforward, Mr. Lanes," she said, folding her hands. "But I will provide you with the 7 signs you seek. Be warned, they will not come to you plainly. These signs are like the fragrances you create, subtle, layered, and only fully revealed to those who pay attention." Gabriel leaned forward, intrigued despite his skepticism. "I'll do whatever it takes to recognize them." The mystic nodded, closing her eyes. A moment of silence passed before she spoke again, her voice carrying a rhythmic cadence. "Where storms rage, she will be your shelter. Her laughter will echo in your soul, though it may not be the loudest. In a crowded room, her eyes will always find yours. Her hands will embrace the messy and the mundane without hesitation. The essence she carries will linger, unforgettable, but humble. In the chaos of life, she will bring a calm you never knew you needed. And finally, though she won't be perfect, she will stay when all others leave." Gabriel sat back, absorbing her words. "These are abstract," he admitted. "How will I know when I've found them?" Madame Lumiere smiled softly. "You will not know with your mind, Mr. Lanes. You will feel it. The heart has its own language, one that logic cannot translate. Be patient, and the signs will appear when the time is right." Despite his initial doubts, Gabriel felt a flicker of hope. He thanked the mystic and left the shop, stepping out into the crisp winter air. Brooklyn Heights now seemed different, almost alive with possibility. The journey he'd begun wasn't just about finding the right partner. It was about opening himself to a world beyond his calculated, controlled existence. 2 days later, chaos erupted in the Lumina Essence distribution center. A faulty valve on a tank of essential oils had caused a massive spill. The warehouse, usually a hub of orderly efficiency, was now filled with the overpowering aroma of spilled bergamot, sandalwood, and vetiver. Employees scrambled to contain the mess, but their efforts were disorganized at best. Gabriel was pulled from a meeting to address the situation personally. Dressed in his tailored suit, he arrived at the warehouse to find employees either panicking or standing idly by, unsure of how to proceed. The thick puddles of oil on the floor made it dangerous to navigate. "What's going on?" Gabriel demanded, his voice cutting through the noise. A frazzled supervisor approached, wringing his hands. "Mr. Lanes, the spill is larger than we anticipated. Maintenance is overwhelmed, and we're trying to minimize the damage, but—" Gabriel's sharp gaze swept over the scene. He noticed a group of executives standing to the side, their designer shoes and manicured hands untouched by the chaos. Their hushed whispers carried tones of disdain. "This isn't our job," one of them said, shaking her head. "Let the maintenance crew handle it. We're not cleaners." Their attitude grated on Gabriel's nerves. Here was a crisis threatening the integrity of their flagship products, yet those responsible for leading by example were unwilling to step up. His irritation faded when he spotted a single figure amidst the disarray. A woman in a plain blouse and slacks knelt on the floor, her sleeves rolled up as she worked to contain the spill. She wasn't part of the maintenance team, nor did she wear the badge of an executive. She was Sonia Parker, a temporary employee assigned to inventory management. Without hesitation, Sonia donned gloves and began sopping up the oil with absorbent pads, her movements steady and purposeful. Unlike others, she neither complained nor hesitated. Her focus was unwavering, her demeanor calm despite the chaos around her. Intrigued, Gabriel approached her. "Why are you the only one helping?" he asked, crouching beside her. She looked up briefly, her hazel eyes meeting his. "Because someone has to," she said simply. If we don't clean this up quickly, the damage will get worse. It's not about who's responsible. It's about what needs to be done." Her words struck a chord. Gabriel saw in her a quiet strength, a willingness to embrace the unglamorous tasks that others avoided. She reminded him of one of Madame Lumiere's signs: her hands will embrace the messy and the mundane without hesitation. Inspired, Gabriel grabbed a pair of gloves and joined her. The executives stared in disbelief as their CEO knelt on the warehouse floor, helping a temporary employee clean the spill. Sonia glanced at him, a hint of surprise in her expression. "You don't have to do this, Mr. Lanes," she said. "No," he replied, a faint smile playing on his lips. "But sometimes the best way to lead is by example." As they worked side by side, Gabriel couldn't help but feel a sense of clarity. The experience wasn't just about cleaning up a spill, it was a revelation about the kind of person he wanted in his life. The spill was finally contained, the warehouse floor cleaned, and operations resumed by the next morning. But Gabriel couldn't stop thinking about Sonia Parker. Her unassuming nature and willingness to take action had left a lasting impression on him. Later that week, back in his sleek office overlooking Manhattan, Gabriel recounted the incident to Marcus during one of their casual evening chats. "I'm telling you, Marcus, it wasn't just what she did, it was how she did it," Gabriel said, swirling a glass of whiskey in his hand. "No hesitation, no complaints. She just saw the problem and stepped in." Marcus smirked. "You sound like you found one of your mystical signs." Gabriel leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant. "Maybe I have. Madame Lumiere said the signs wouldn't be obvious, but I can't shake the feeling that Sonia embodies one of them." "Let me get this straight," Marcus said, leaning forward. "You're considering a temp worker, someone who doesn't run in your circles, as a potential perfect match? I thought your checklist was about refinement and sophistication." "It's not about status," Gabriel replied firmly. "It's about values, and she demonstrated something rare, something most people around here lack." Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Gabriel's tone left no room for argument. A week later, Lumina Essence prepared to host an exclusive gala celebrating the launch of their latest fragrance, Ethereal Whisper. The event was set to take place in a grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel, with New York's elite in attendance. Gabriel, as the face of the company, would give the opening speech. Among the guests was Audrey Mitchell, a rising star in the world of luxury marketing. Her reputation for charm and sophistication preceded her, and her entrance into the ballroom turned heads. Audrey was a vision of elegance, her presence commanding attention without effort. Gabriel was introduced to her by one of his senior executives, and their conversation flowed effortlessly. Audrey's confidence was magnetic, her laughter light and melodic. Gabriel couldn't help but notice how her poise mirrored his own, making her seem like a natural fit for his world. "Mr. Lanes," Audrey said with a smile, "your company's reputation is unmatched. But what truly fascinates me is the creativity behind your fragrances. They tell stories, don't they?" Gabriel nodded, intrigued by her observation. "That's the goal. Every scent should evoke something personal, something unforgettable." Their exchange deepened as the night went on, and Gabriel found himself captivated by Audrey's charisma. She seemed to embody everything he thought he wanted in a partner: intelligence, ambition, and a shared appreciation for the art of fragrance. But as the evening wound down, Gabriel felt a nagging sense of incompleteness. For all of Audrey's perfection, there was something missing, a depth or grounding he couldn't quite articulate. The following Monday, Gabriel decided to walk through the distribution center during his routine inspections. He didn't expect to see Sonia Parker again, but there she was, carefully organizing inventory in one of the aisles. She was focused, her movements efficient and precise. "Sonia!" Gabriel called out. She turned, momentarily startled, before offering a polite smile. "Mr. Lanes, what brings you down here?" "I like to stay connected to all parts of the company," he said, walking toward her, "and I wanted to thank you again for stepping up during the spill last week. Your effort didn't go unnoticed." Sonia brushed off his praise with a modest shrug. "I just did what needed to be done." "That's exactly why it stood out," Gabriel said. "Most people wouldn't have." For a moment there was silence between them. Gabriel felt an urge to know more about her. What drove someone like Sonia, with no clear obligation, to act so selflessly? "Have you ever thought about what keeps everything running smoothly here?" Sonia asked, breaking the quiet. "It's not the big decisions or the fancy launches. It's the little things, the details. If those are ignored, the whole operation can fall apart." Her words struck him again, echoing Madame Lumiere's warning that the important things were often hidden in plain sight. "Would you ever want to do more here?" Gabriel asked impulsively. "Take on a bigger role?" Sonia tilted her head, surprised. "I hadn't thought about it. But I like the work. It feels meaningful." Gabriel smiled, seeing her potential for the first time. "Let me know if you change your mind. I think you have a lot to offer." As he walked away, Gabriel couldn't shake the feeling that Sonia represented something he'd been searching for. As the weeks passed, Gabriel couldn't help but notice a growing disparity between the polished surface of his world and the quiet authenticity of Sonia Parker. He attended gala events, business dinners, and high-profile meetings, but the shallow glamour of it all began to wear thin. Even his conversations with Audrey Mitchell, who continued to express interest in both him and his company, left him unsatisfied. Meanwhile, Sonia's grounded presence lingered in his mind. She seemed to embody one of Madame Lumiere's signs. Her hands will embrace the messy and the mundane without hesitation. It wasn't just her actions during the spill, it was the way she approached everything with humility and purpose, never seeking recognition. One late evening, Gabriel sat alone in his office, the city lights twinkling like scattered stars. He opened his leather notebook, where he had written down Madame Lumiere's 7 signs. Reading them again, he felt a pang of doubt. Could someone as unassuming as Sonia fulfill all of them? "Where storms rage, she will be your shelter," he murmured, his eyes lingering on the first sign. Had he been too blind to recognize that true strength might come in unexpected forms? Gabriel's introspection was interrupted by a sudden crisis within the company. A key client had received a batch of faulty products, jeopardizing a multi-million-dollar partnership. The problem needed to be resolved immediately, and Gabriel called an emergency meeting with his leadership team. As he entered the boardroom, the tension was palpable. Executives whispered nervously, their confidence shaken by the potential fallout. Audrey Mitchell, who had been shadowing Gabriel for weeks as part of her integration into the company, was also present. She exuded calm confidence, offering polished solutions that were more about damage control than addressing the root of the issue. But as Gabriel listened, his frustration grew. The proposals lacked depth, and none addressed the real problem, preventing similar issues in the future. To his surprise, Sonia Parker entered the room midway through the meeting, carrying a folder of documents. Gabriel had asked her to compile a detailed report on production workflows, but he hadn't expected her to deliver it in person. "I'm sorry for interrupting," Sonia said, her tone measured but firm. "But I think I have some insights that might help." Audrey raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. Gabriel, however, gestured for Sonia to continue. She placed the folder on the table and began to outline the inconsistencies she'd discovered in the production line. Her analysis was thorough, pinpointing the exact flaws that had led to the faulty batch. "If we address these gaps," Sonia concluded, "we can prevent this kind of issue from happening again. It might take extra effort, but the long-term benefits will far outweigh the cost." The room fell silent. Sonia's presentation had revealed a level of detail that the executives had overlooked. Audrey was the first to break the silence. "That's impressive," she said, though her tone was more grudging than genuine. Gabriel nodded, his respect for Sonia deepening. "Thank you, Sonia. This is exactly the kind of proactive thinking we need." As the meeting adjourned, Gabriel pulled Sonia aside. "You didn't have to step into that meeting," he said, his voice warm with appreciation. "I thought it was important," she replied simply, "and I couldn't stay silent, knowing I had something that could help." Gabriel's chest tightened. Once again, Sonia had demonstrated an integrity and courage that resonated with him. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just doing what felt right. That evening, Gabriel found himself at a crossroads. Audrey Mitchell had invited him to dinner, ostensibly to discuss business, but with an unmistakable undercurrent of personal interest. Audrey was dazzling, there was no denying it. She represented everything Gabriel had once thought he wanted: sophistication, ambition, and a shared appreciation for the finer things in life. But as he sat across from her in the dimly lit restaurant, her polished charm began to feel hollow. "I admire your vision, Gabriel," Audrey said, leaning forward with a practiced smile. "I think we could build something incredible together, not just professionally, but personally as well." Gabriel smiled politely, but felt a growing disconnection. For all her allure, Audrey seemed more interested in his empire than in him as a person. The contrast between her and Sonia was stark. Where Audrey represented a world of calculated ambition, Sonia embodied something deeper: authenticity, humility, and quiet strength. When the dinner ended, Gabriel made a decision. He wasn't going to settle for a relationship that looked perfect on the surface, but lacked substance beneath. A few days later, Gabriel returned to the warehouse, ostensibly to check on the implementation of Sonia's recommendations. He found her organizing inventory again, her focus unwavering. "Sonia," he called, and she turned, her expression curious but calm. "I wanted to thank you," he said, stepping closer, "not just for your work, but for showing me what truly matters. You've taught me more about leadership and life than anyone else here." Sonia looked away, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. "I'm just doing my job, Mr. Lanes." "It's more than that," Gabriel insisted. "You've shown me what it means to care about the details, to value what others overlook, and that's something rare." Their eyes met, and for the first time, Gabriel felt a sense of clarity. Sonia wasn't just someone who fit Madame Lumiere's signs. She embodied them in ways he hadn't even realized. Claire DuPont stood before her mirror in her elegantly minimalistic apartment, adjusting the delicate spray nozzle of her latest creation. She had spent weeks perfecting this fragrance, not merely a perfume, but a calculated tool in her arsenal. Its composition was an intricate blend of jasmine, cedarwood, and a whisper of musk. Subtle, yet unforgettable. It wasn't meant to overpower, but to linger, its scent weaving itself into memory like a whispered promise. "This is the one," Claire murmured, smiling at her reflection. Today was critical. Thierry Logan, CEO of Lumina Essence, and her carefully chosen target, had called a high-stakes strategy meeting. Claire had planned her approach meticulously. She knew how to capture his attention, not with bold declarations or obvious flirtations, but with quiet, undeniable allure. The grand conference room in Lumina Essence's Midtown Manhattan headquarters was abuzz with energy. Executives shuffled papers, exchanged hurried whispers, and tapped nervously on their laptops. At the head of the polished mahogany table, Thierry sat, absorbed in his notes. When Claire entered, the atmosphere subtly shifted. Heads turned, conversations faltered. Her presence had that effect, an effortless elegance that commanded attention. "Good morning, Thierry," Claire greeted, leaning just enough to offer a polite but intimate embrace. As she did, her fragrance enveloped him, soft yet commanding. Thierry inhaled unconsciously, his brow furrowing slightly. The scent was familiar, yet intriguingly unfamiliar, a curious mix of déjà vu and discovery. For the remainder of the meeting, his focus wavered. Even as he discussed projections and market strategies, his mind kept returning to that aroma. At the meeting's conclusion, while attendees gathered their belongings, Thierry approached Claire. "That perfume," he began, his voice curious but measured. "It's distinctive. I can't quite place it. What is it?" Claire tilted her head, smiling as though the question were expected. "It's something personal," she said softly. "A fragrance I've been developing. It's not about cost, but about connection. I believe a true scent should linger in the soul, leaving a mark deeper than its price tag." Her words resonated more deeply than Claire could have hoped. Thierry thought of the conversation he'd recently had with his friend Marcus, the one where he'd shared his belief that love, like fragrance, should transcend the superficial. Before he could respond, the meeting room door opened, and Sonia Parker, an inventory assistant, entered with a tray of coffee and documents. With her unassuming smile and quiet efficiency, she began distributing materials. "Excuse me for the interruption," Sonia said, setting a cup before Thierry. "I brought the reports you requested." As she leaned slightly to place the files, Thierry caught a faint but unmistakable aroma. It was subtle and understated, a blend of lavender, sandalwood, and honey. Unlike Claire's perfume, this scent wasn't crafted to captivate a room, but seemed to carry a history, an authenticity that struck something deep within him. "Sonia," Thierry asked suddenly, "your perfume. What is it?" Sonia straightened, clearly surprised by the question. "Oh, it's nothing fancy," she said with a modest laugh. "Just something my grandmother taught me to mix. It reminds me of home." Home. The word lingered in Thierry's mind. That fragrance, it evoked memories of his childhood, playing in the gardens of his mother's house, where the air was always filled with the natural scents she loved. Claire, watching the exchange, felt a pang of frustration. The effect of her perfume, so carefully orchestrated, now seemed to pale against the simplicity of Sonia's homemade concoction. "That's lovely," Thierry murmured, his gaze lingering on Sonia, even as she quietly exited the room. Claire's frustration simmered as she returned to her office. This was an unexpected complication. Thierry's reaction to Sonia's scent had been instinctive, emotional. Two things Claire had learned to control in her calculated climb. Sitting at her desk, Claire opened her laptop. Her fingers flew across the keys as she searched Thierry's digital files, using the password she had memorized during an earlier meeting. Perfume Eternal 35. Minutes later, she found what she was looking for, an encrypted file titled The 7 Signs. Opening it, she read through the descriptions, each one more poetic than the last. "Where the storm rages, she will be your refuge. Her laughter will not be the loudest, but it will resonate deepest in your soul. Her scent will not be the most expensive, but it will leave an indelible mark." Claire's lips curled into a determined smile. Now she had a roadmap, and she wasn't about to let a modest employee like Sonia derail her plan. The next day, Thierry faced an intense negotiation with a group of international partners. The discussion was tense, with raised voices and conflicting demands dominating the room. Thierry's usual composure faltered under the pressure. Claire seized the moment. "Gentlemen," she interjected, her voice calm and measured, "let's take a step back. We all want the same outcome, long-term success. If we approach this with flexibility, I'm sure we can find a compromise." Her words diffused some of the tension, and Thierry shot her a grateful look. But just as the atmosphere began to shift, the door opened, and Sonia entered with a tray of coffee and light refreshments. "Forgive the interruption," she said softly. "I thought a small break might help clear the air. Sometimes a fresh perspective comes with a calm mind." The senior partner, a stern-faced man who had been the loudest critic moments before, glanced at her with a faint smile. "Perhaps you're right," he said, accepting a cup. "A clear mind often brings the clearest solutions." As the room relaxed, Thierry couldn't help but compare the two women before him. Claire's intervention had been calculated and strategic, but Sonia's presence was effortless, her impact profound, without being contrived. The negotiation concluded successfully, thanks in part to Claire's polished argument and Sonia's unexpected, yet calming, contribution. Thierry leaned back in his chair as the last of the international partners left the conference room. His mind, however, wasn't on the agreement. It kept circling back to the moments that had transpired. Claire had presented herself as the storm's refuge, fulfilling one of the signs on his list. But Sonia's quiet strength lingered in his thoughts. Her genuine demeanor and simple gesture had diffused a tense room in ways no practiced negotiation tactic could. Later that evening, Thierry found himself scrolling through the checklist he'd created, his mind replaying Sonia's soft smile and unassuming presence. In her penthouse apartment, Claire sat with her laptop open, reviewing Thierry's list of signs. Her jaw tightened as she reread the criteria. Sonia's presence in the meeting earlier had unnerved her. Thierry's attention had shifted toward the assistant, even if momentarily, and that was something Claire couldn't ignore. "I've worked too hard for this," Claire muttered, her manicured nails tapping against the desk. The list, however, gave her a renewed sense of control. She understood Thierry's signals better than anyone. She would ensure that each of them pointed toward her, not Sonia. Her first objective? Mastering the signal she hadn't anticipated needing to compete for. The scent. Claire spent the next day refining her fragrance, adjusting its composition to make it even more distinctive. If Thierry admired nostalgia and authenticity, she would imbue her creation with subtle notes of old-world charm while retaining its luxurious essence. While Claire schemed, Sonia continued her work in quiet humility. She hadn't realized the stir her presence had caused in the meeting. For her, the act of bringing coffee and refreshments was a small, simple way to contribute during tense moments. However, her actions hadn't gone unnoticed. Thierry made a point to visit the warehouse the following morning, ostensibly to check on operations, but, in truth, to see Sonia. He found her in the inventory section, carefully organizing shipments. "Sonia?" Thierry greeted, his tone lighter than usual. She turned, surprised to see him. "Mr. Logan, is there something you need?" "I wanted to thank you again for what you did yesterday," Thierry said. "Your presence made a difference." Sonia smiled modestly. "I'm glad I could help. Sometimes the smallest things make the biggest impact." Her words struck him, reminding him of one of Madame Lumiere's signs. "Her laughter will not be the loudest, but it will resonate deepest in your soul." "Sonia," Thierry began, pausing as if searching for the right words, "would you ever consider taking on a larger role here? Your insight during stressful moments is remarkable." She looked down, unsure. "I appreciate the thought, but I'm happy where I am for now. I like knowing that even the small things I do can make a difference." Thierry nodded, though her humility intrigued him further. 2 weeks later, a major crisis shook Lumina Essence. A miscalculation in production costs had left the company facing potential losses on a major international contract. Thierry called an emergency meeting to strategize. The room buzzed with tension as executives presented their solutions, none of which seemed viable. Claire seized the opportunity to take center stage. Confidently, she approached Thierry with a folder of projections. "Thierry," she began, her tone steady, "we're in uncharted waters here, but I've analyzed the situation. Sometimes the best move is to cut your losses. Abandon the deal before the damage grows." Her logic was flawless, but something about her words felt cold and detached. Thierry frowned, staring at the numbers in front of him. Moments later, the door opened, and Sonia entered, with her usual calm demeanor, carrying a tray of chamomile tea. "Excuse the interruption," she said gently, setting the tray on the table, "but I thought some tea might help everyone focus. It's a remedy my grandmother swore by for stressful situations." Her presence, as always, brought a sense of ease to the room. Thierry watched as she distributed the tea, her simple gesture softening the sharp edges of the moment. When she approached him, Thierry asked impulsively, "Sonia, if you were in my position, what would you do?" Sonia hesitated, clearly caught off guard, but then she met his gaze and answered, "I wouldn't give up, Mr. Logan. Even when things seem bleak, there's always something worth salvaging. Sometimes the hardest moments reveal opportunities we didn't see before. I believe in finding value where others see failure." Her words, spoken with quiet conviction, resonated deeply with Thierry. They echoed one of Madame Lumiere's signs. In the chaos of life, she will bring a calm you never knew you needed. Claire, watching the interaction, felt a pang of frustration. Once again, Sonia had managed to command Thierry's attention without even trying. That night, Thierry reviewed the crisis again, this time incorporating Sonia's perspective. Her suggestion to look for hidden opportunities led him to reconsider a clause in the contract. After hours of analysis, he devised a strategy to renegotiate terms with the international partners, preserving the deal and minimizing losses. The plan worked. The following week, Luminescence not only saved the agreement but strengthened its relationship with the client. Thierry publicly credited Sonia for inspiring the solution, further elevating her standing within the company. For Claire, the announcement was a bitter pill to swallow. She had offered logic, but Sonia had offered wisdom, and Thierry valued the latter more. As Luminescence prepared for its annual gala, Thierry decided it was time to make a personal announcement. The event, held in the opulent ballroom of a Manhattan hotel, was attended by the city's elite. Claire arrived in a gown that epitomized sophistication, confident that this would be the night Thierry revealed their relationship. She had fulfilled every signal on his list, or so she thought. When Thierry took the stage, the room fell silent. "I've spent much of my life pursuing success," Thierry began, "but along the way I realized that true fulfillment comes not from what we achieve, but from who we share it with. Tonight, I want to introduce the person who has shown me the meaning of authenticity, resilience, and love." Claire's heart raced. This was her moment. She began to rise from her seat. "Sonia Parker," Thierry said, his eyes searching the crowd. The room gasped. Sonia, seated near the back, froze in shock. "Please join me," Thierry continued, extending his hand toward her. Sonia hesitated, her face a mixture of disbelief and emotion. Slowly she stood, the crowd parting as she made her way to the stage. As she reached him, Thierry took her hands and spoke, his voice trembling with emotion. "Sonia, you've taught me that love isn't about perfection, it's about presence. You've shown me that the most valuable things are often the simplest, and that true connection comes from the heart, not the head. I love you. Will you marry me?" Tears streaming down her face, Sonia nodded. The room erupted in applause as Thierry pulled her into a gentle embrace. Claire, standing frozen in place, felt the weight of her calculated efforts crumble. Thierry's choice was clear. He had found the woman who met all 7 signs, not in perfection, but in authenticity. Claire Dupont left the ballroom in a storm of frustration, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. The applause from inside felt like mockery, each cheer twisting the knife deeper. How had this happened? She had read the signs, mastered them, tailored herself into the very image of Thierry's ideal woman, yet she had lost to a simple assistant. Back in her car, Claire clenched her fists, her breathing heavy. Her phone buzzed with a text from a colleague. "Claire, what happened? We thought for sure he'd choose you." Claire didn't respond. She stared out the window, the city lights blurring into streaks of color as the car sped through Manhattan. For the first time in years, Claire felt defeated. The weeks following Thierry's proposal to Sonia were a whirlwind of change for both of them. Sonia, unused to the spotlight, found herself at the center of attention within Luminescence. Employees congratulated her in passing, and her story began circulating as a modern fairy tale, the humble assistant who won the heart of the company's CEO. Sonia handled the newfound attention with grace, but there were moments when it all felt overwhelming. One afternoon, she found herself back in the quiet of the inventory room, her hands brushing over the shelves she had organized countless times before. Thierry found her there. "Taking a break from the chaos?" he asked, stepping into the room. Sonia turned and smiled. "It's nice to come back to something familiar." Thierry stepped closer, his expression soft. "I never wanted to disrupt your life like this, Sonia. If this feels like too much, tell me, and we'll figure it out together." Sonia reached for his hand, her touch light but reassuring. "It's not too much, it's just different, but I'm learning to embrace it." Thierry nodded, his heart swelling with admiration. Sonia's authenticity was a constant reminder of why he had fallen for her. Claire, however, wasn't done. The defeat lingered like a bitter taste in her mouth, and she was determined to regain her footing. She returned to the one thing she knew better than anyone else: strategy. Claire began leveraging her connections, positioning herself as indispensable to Thierry's business. She spearheaded high-profile projects, secured lucrative deals, and ensured her name was always associated with success. Her ultimate plan? To prove to Thierry that Sonia might fulfill his romantic ideals, but Claire was the one who could secure his empire. As the weeks turned into months, the differences between Sonia's and Claire's approaches became more apparent. Thierry often found himself caught between their contrasting perspectives, Claire's sharp, calculated strategies versus Sonia's instinctive, people-first approach. One such instance occurred during a board meeting to discuss a potential merger with a European fragrance house. Claire presented a detailed proposal, highlighting the financial advantages of the merger. "This deal could elevate Lumina Essence to the top of the global market," Claire argued. "It's a calculated risk, but the payoff would be worth it." Sonia, seated quietly at the edge of the table, hesitated before speaking. "I don't mean to question the strategy," she began, "but have we considered the impact this merger might have on our employees and our brand identity? Expanding too quickly can dilute what makes Lumina Essence special." Claire rolled her eyes subtly, but Thierry noticed. He looked at Sonia, her words echoing his own unspoken concerns. "Thank you, Sonia," Thierry said. "That's an important point." Claire's jaw tightened. Once again, Sonia had shifted the narrative with a few heartfelt words. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Thierry invited Sonia to his home. The apartment, perched high above the city, was filled with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Manhattan skyline. Despite its luxurious decor, the space felt cold, untouched by personal warmth. "I don't spend much time here," Thierry admitted, as he poured them both glasses of wine. Sonia looked around, her gaze lingering on the empty walls. "It's beautiful, but it feels incomplete." Thierry raised an eyebrow. "Incomplete? How so?" Sonia set down her glass, her expression thoughtful. "It doesn't feel like a home. A home should tell a story, your story. This place feels like it's waiting for someone to bring it to life." Her words struck a chord. Thierry realized she was right. His life had been so consumed by ambition that he had neglected the personal. "You're right," Thierry said, a smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe you can help me fix that." Sonia blushed, but before she could respond, Thierry stepped closer. "You've already brought so much life to my world, Sonia," he said. "Every time I look at you, I'm reminded of what's truly important." At Lumina Essence's annual shareholder meeting, Thierry made an unexpected announcement. Standing before the room of investors and executives, he spoke not about profits or expansion, but about values. "Success isn't just about numbers," Thierry said. "It's about the people who help create it. Sonia Parker has reminded me of that, and I'm proud to announce that she will be taking on a new leadership role within luminescence. The room erupted in applause, though Claire remained silent, her expression carefully neutral. Sonia, seated in the audience, looked up at Thierry with tears in her eyes. Months later, Sonia and Thierry married in a small, intimate ceremony in upstate New York. The venue, surrounded by wildflowers and lush greenery, reflected Sonia's love for simplicity and nature. As they exchanged vows, Thierry couldn't help but marvel at how far he had come. The signs Madame Lumière had given him were no longer abstract ideas. They were embodied in the woman standing before him. "You are my calm in the storm," Thierry said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You are my home." Sonia smiled, her voice trembling as she replied, "And you are my heart." Their kiss sealed a partnership built on authenticity, humility, and love, a true testament to the power of the unexpected.